Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to continue our session with inviting Mr. Patrick Varyn to delivering his keynote speech on Internet of Things. Please welcome Mr. Patrick Varyn.
Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. As you know, my name is Patrick Veron. Actually, there's an I here that you don't see. Just for you to know, because the topic is IoT. It's not just OT, which is actually a very interesting way to start this discussion. Because speaking of IP, at one point in time, I was thinking that I should put some copyrights on IoT being the combination of IT and OT. So showing just OT here, I think is interesting because it shows that the key topic is about OT, not just about IT. So with that, so very happy to be with you this morning. I think it's, thank you for inviting me. I'm part of the family in some ways, right? So I'm trying to be more involved with all the IoT stories with this particular university. So this morning I'm gonna share with you what I see is the current state of the IoT. If you have seen the slides of Professor Suresh a bit earlier, I come more from the extreme right of the slides. So I've been in the industry forever after I've left university myself some years ago. And the idea for that show and that discussion is also to see how we can come from the industry, the practical implementation in the field, back into what you're doing here in the university. And when it comes to sharing with you what's the status of IoT, and to make this, how many are interested in IoT? Yeah, you better show more. The reason I'm asking is also because, you know, it's morning, and on the morning, going towards lunch, and sometimes can be a bit boring to hear some guys listening, speaking about, you know, what is doing on everyday basis. So today what I wanted also is to bring someone who is actually deploying IoT in the field here in Malaysia with us. So that it's not just consulting stuff that should be delivered, to deliver the discussion together.
Network operator. So what that means is that we have a wireless network coverage throughout Malaysia, which is dedicated to industrial IoT. So which we can talk about a little bit later. But I'm part of Esperante, heading up the technology and ecosystem function. So I look at a lot of solutions. We try to solve a lot of industry problems, and especially how IoT and help industries when it comes to working on their transformational journey towards Industry 4.0.
Yes, and again, thank you for being with us today. I think, you know, we've seen this slide this morning presented by Dr. Suresh, starting with, you know, the research, fundamental research, applied research. I think the story of Esperante and Sigfox was kind of your technical or technological father, shall I say it that way? And in terms of creating some mass market products that are of use in the field, I think that would be a very good illustration as well of what was shared with you in the early part today. So with that, let's jump into the few slides that I've prepared. If I figured out the way it works. Which one? The top one? Okay. All right. So this is me. I don't want to spend too much time on this. My background has been with telco, with IT, with IoT. I've been working with telecommunications company from Alcatel, Alcatel-Lucent, Cisco. I've started the Internet of Things for Cisco in 2011. Was not even called IoT at the time, by the way. It was like smart energy, smart manufacturing, and smart manufacturing, industrial IoT, and Industry 4.0. In my personal definition, there's no difference, right? So everybody calls it different in different ways, coming from different angles, but fundamentally, we are connecting devices, objects, things, using communication networks, and this is what we do in an industrial context. So today we're going to share with you what we see in terms of IoT and what we see IoT in an industrial context is. So we will call it IIoT, but we could call it Industry 4.0 because to us it's the same. So enough of me. If I can still make it work. That's which one? This one? Okay, here we go. So still, there's an I here. So IoT, what is it? So there are many different definitions, and you'll see. I'm sure you're familiar with at least one of those, if not most of these. What really we believe is that IoT comprises networks of physical objects and connected sensors that automate operations by gathering information automatically about those physical assets to monitor their status or their behavior, and using that information to provide visibility and control and optimize the processes and resources. And, quite importantly, improve decision making. Ashok, is it what your customers are asking for?
By definition, yes. So let's put it in a. Let's take an example of a practical situation. Today we have. I mean, when it comes to IR 4.0, you will notice that it's all about data. It's all about processing high volumes of data. It's all about storing lots and lots of data in and having the right infrastructure to actually be able to manage, compute, and actually result and come up with results. So when we talk about IoT in a very practical way, is that how do I get information from areas that I cannot today? So today you have a mobile phone, which is technically an IoT device, which is actually a very advanced IoT device. It's actually giving you today, able to give you information like how many steps you have taken. Have you hit your 10,000 steps today? What's your heart rate? What's your level of time spent staring at the screen? It's data that tells you, which that data can also be used to generate some other kind of results. So this is exactly what, in a very practical way, IoT means. So how industries are using and implementing sensors and actuators or any kind of technology to actually access a particular set of information from an area that they could not today. So that information then feeds back into a global or much more larger processing or decision-making process, which will then allow you to decide on what's the best way to do certain things, what's the best way to change the process, what does it take to optimize, does it take to become more efficient. So all industries are looking at this to, in fact, at the end of the day, we'll come to that a bit later, is everybody's trying to solve a problem and how IoT can be used to solve these kind of problems.
Yeah, and so exactly, and IoT is really all what is there in the gray part. So you have connected car, you have the connected factories, the trucks, the smart buildings, and everything. So it's a pretty wide, and actually that's probably one of the key issues. Probably it's a kind of very encompassing subject. So that's why we'll try to narrow it down to just a few examples. So that's another definition of IoT. This is from Bain, if I'm not wrong. And it just shows, and that's one of the key important message. Internet of Things is not one single market. There's many different markets that are grouped under the same terminology, but really, as we can see here, serving a number of different customers or enterprise and industrial using some of the key ingredients. That's why everybody's mentioning about IoT, because essentially you are using some of the same components to do the same kind of things in different industries and create the relevance for those different industries, right? So there's been different numbers put on what Internet of Things mean. This one is Internet of Everything. Why? Because there's a moment in time when Cisco, the company I was working for, was getting a little bit upset because everybody was using the terminology IoT. So they said, no, it's the Internet of Everything, which doesn't mean anything if you ask me, but that's what they called it. So some of the key components. So what is IoT made of? So IoT infrastructure we've mentioned there. I think maybe I'll let you comment about that, Ashok.
Yes. If I put it in the simplest form, it's like earlier I explained. It's a piece of data that you're trying to tap. So you have a sensor, you have a device that's actually harnessing the data. The data then needs to be you actually process that information for different purposes, for decision making purposes, or and so forth. So just with those basic three elements, you actually need to understand the whole lot of infrastructure that goes into place that allows this technology to function. So I would say it's quite descriptive over here, where you have products and connectivity and applications, because the applications are primarily around managing the data, processing the data, and then executing certain actions. In an IT environment, it's all about everything's online, everything's integrated. How one system triggers another system. So how the data that's been tapped into and harnessed is going to trigger all the other automated processes in the IT environment.
And I think the important thing here is that you can see there's a number of components, and the key things in terms of IoT is the ability to connect everything together, right? So a number of people come from the hardware, or some come from the software, some come from the connectivity side. That's why some of the telcos are not that successful in terms of doing IoT. Obviously, there's all these elements about the application. There's some external information to be gathered that needs to be integrated with your business systems. And this key point here, I think Professor Suresh could speak for hours on this. This is about the identity and the security that goes to it. One of the key issues, and I think you, being the VP of technology, you could speak for hours as well on this. Yes. But security is one of the key reasons, in my opinion, why 6-7 years ago IoT could not take off. Because nobody would feel comfortable deploying IoT devices. Information goes through the network, don't know how. Operator says it's safe, okay, I have to trust them or not. So I think security is one of the key aspects for IoT. So how did you resolve that?
I think Professor Suresh, Dr. Suresh shared something very interesting. 15 years ago, we did not have, the internet was still at its early stages, and it's not as booming as it is today. So security is always a question that is asked by customers. I would answer it in two ways. So one, of course, I would take Dr. Suresh's approach, saying that it's highly secure. Yeah. But in a real world situation where today we are working with a lot of, for instance, cloud infrastructure providers like Microsoft and AWS and Google. Again, I'm giving a very practical answer to industry situation. So AWS has about security support engineers who are looking at the whole AWS infrastructure globally and any kind of service that runs on it. So for me to question the ability of AWS security is, I'm not worthy. And companies such as Microsoft and AWS are in the industry for this reason because they have the capabilities, they have the experience in the IT industry, ICT industry to provide highly secured connected solutions. So that's typically how we answer our customers. Of course, it's always there is always the question is a fair question. It's never a wrong question. So, but that's our answer to that.
Okay. One of the other thing is the platform. So everybody's speaking platform. Platform has probably, if you have 200 people in the room, you have 250 definitions. So would you like to describe the way you've been initially thinking of what the platform should do and how to use it, right? Because I've myself come across different kind of platforms, and everybody says they have the platform and the best IoT platforms for IoT, but what does it mean in concrete life?
Um, uh, Platforms, I mean, some call it platforms, some call it ecosystem. Some of them use the terminologies like services, I mean, in the cloud business, in the cloud environment, they use terms like services. So yes, platform essentially is about when you start looking at tapping into, when you scale out and you have millions of data points and billions of bits of data that's flowing through into all coming together at the point when all these bits of data needs to be managed, needs to be analyzed, needs to be correlated, needs to be analyzed, and once that analysis based on the problem that you're trying to solve and that data has actually been massaged or processed and put together to actually find the outcome that you're looking for, then you would want to, the next step you would want to have the ability to have this data available at any point of time where I do my research, when I access my laptop, when I get onto my presentation, I want this data available. So there's a bit of visualization that comes into play. So the third one, it's when all this data needs to be fed to another source. So I'm already working on, let's say, agriculture data. I'm monitoring. I have 12 months of soil acidity level data that I need to transfer it into an environment which I can correlate with the type of fertilizer that is being applied by the industry or the kind of fertilizer that's acquired. It's two different systems. So platforms, the goal or the design or the providers of the platforms are to manage all of this. So you would have different kinds of complexities, different kinds of flexibilities on platforms. You would have very simple platforms. You would have very highly integrated, highly rich feature platforms. So it really depends on what is the level of use that you would be expecting.
Okay, that's one example of platform, the Azure IoT reference architecture. This is just an illustration. It's not that we're promoting this one as opposed to some other ones. It's just an illustration. And after that, we have your own platform. So the Experanti, so what you've deployed in the field for the functions that you wanted to, that you thought were important to run the business. So you want to guide us through this one a little bit?
Yeah. So although if you do a little bit more research about Experanti after this, we are coming under the context of low-powered wide area network. So again, when you talk about millions of data points where they are very remote and connectivity, communication would be a challenge, this is where we come in. But in reality, the landscape of IoT is actually so wide. So when we start talking about high bandwidth kind of applications like robotics and artificial intelligence and remote health. So these are high bandwidth kind of IoT solutions. For example, I'm a heart patient and I have a device stuck onto me and it's taking all my vitals, including my body readings and also my heart rate and so on, which are while I'm sitting at home. So this data is then sent over your home Wi-Fi network or your GSM network, telco network, which then goes into an environment where doctors will use to monitor, to decide, even do remote kind of actions towards the patient who are sitting at home. So from a technical perspective, I mean, this is somewhat an idea what kind of a real world implementation of 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 IoT would be. So don't, I mean, it's not necessarily to be looked at just from an IoT perspective, but if you look at from a point of um, um, if you want to execute bringing data analytics into your company, you want to do analysis about um, your consumers, you want to have data analytics about your sales. So these are, so don't just restrict it to IoT, but this environment or this sort of like framework is actually a good example when it comes to how do you define an infrastructure that's able to manage data in a very efficient, effective way. So you will see that it's a lot of functionality around information management when it comes to the right technology for processing data in DBs. It's all about aggregating the data and how that data is actually being channeled out. Is it just about visualization, how that translates into business intelligence, how that translates into the decision-making process? So I heard earlier about someone who's doing research on DSS, decision support systems, right? So decision support systems is essentially about how do you manage all the information, data that you have to support the whole decision-making process. So you need faster data, you need more data, you need data from as many different data points as possible. So the more data you have, the more granular data you have, the more accurate your decision will become. So how do you manage millions of and terabytes of data to support and to execute your data support, decision making, decision support system and processes? Thank you. Tell me if
It's good. Thank you. No, actually, it's a real life experience, so I think it's always very useful. Um, so we've prepared a couple of slides there on obstacles and enablers for IoT to take off. I think we've mentioned about that a little bit already. So, but simply put, why is IoT taking off right now? So hardware is available. Connectivity becomes pervasive. Development is, I put it easy, you put it probably differently, but I would like to say it's easy. At least it's feasible. Cloud can deal with big data, and there's a number of new innovative scenarios, right? And you can take it the other way around. So you have a number of scenarios out there that companies and customers want to solve and can rely on all those elements. It's kind of a very simplified way to put it, but this is, I think, a way to put it. This one is a bit more elaborated, prepared by McKinsey, not by me. So obviously, this is very smartly put. And they have identified 5 types of enablers that are needed to maximize the IoT impact. So, but actually, since we are not that stupid, we've put them in a different way. So software and hardware technologies are there. We got a point. Interoperability, we've mentioned it, yes. Right? Intellectual property, security, privacy, confidentiality. We've dealt with that a lot this morning already. I think this is very important. And there's a lot that we can talk about. I think Ashok that you see here, beyond all what he does, in the daily in his daily operations. He's also tying up with universities in Malaysia, so you might want to say a word about that too.
Yeah.
That might be the right moment.
So, uh, when Patrick invited me to this event, and when he mentioned it's with MUST, I mean anything to do when it comes to the universities and the academic institution, I personally and Esperanti as a whole, we are super excited about it because one of the things that I think Dr. Suresh also mentioned this morning. So the question of why aren't there many companies who have actually gone into the channels and gone into the process of exploring the possibilities of growing with grants and then eventually becoming a public listed company. Why only one? Why not so many? Um, Being a student in the past and eventually going into the industry, I think the biggest challenge that we had or I had when I was a student is that um, ideas is an idea is an idea as it is, but when an idea is actually solving a problem, when an idea is actually going to change people's lives, an idea that's going to change the way industries operate. They could be more efficient, they could be more environmentally friendly, they can reduce CO2 emissions, they can make people's lives better, they can pay better salaries, they can produce better products. That idea putting into play becomes the actual value because for companies who are trying to achieve that, for individuals who are trying to achieve that change, they have a problem because they don't know how do I do that. So how do I become more environmentally friendly? How do I reduce the amount of CO2 I'm emitting? How do I improve the speed of my production line? Right? That's a problem because I'm trying to improve it. So we, when we were students, we don't know, we had very limited exposure to what's actually happening in the industries, the real problems that they're trying to solve. So we have an idea, but we don't know how to tie it back to a real world problem. So Esperanti and personally myself, we are so excited to work with universities because I think the only way to learn is to know more about these problems that the country, the industry is facing. So by sharing these problems, by first is to share these problems in sessions such as these, to say that this is what a major problem in the industry has, and we need help. And I think the best help and the best support comes from the university. And for us, the other win-win situation is that this research is going to be part of the learning process. So you are going to learn and you're going to be exposed to what Esperanti does, for example, in a day-to-day basis, trying to solve problems in the logistics and transportation industry, trying to solve problems in the agriculture industry. So from that perspective, we are super excited to work with universities. And one area that we could probably talk to with the management of MUST is to actually have students become part of our projects. So when you become part of the implementation of the project, you will actually understand real life, hands-on, day-to-day challenges that customers face and how we are trying to solve it. And how you can solve problems in not just one way, in many ways. So that gives you a real life feeling of facing and trying to solve and trying to change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess this is a message, right? Um, I think another point that we didn't mention much so far is about the public policy. So the need for the environment and the policy in each and every country, especially when there's some security concerns or when you do IoT for healthcare, what to do with the data from the patients, these kind of things. So you need to have the legal and administrative and public framework in place. So that's quite an important aspect as well. Um, so now the challenges of IoT, some of them are still actual. Some are a little bit behind us now. So I think for some time, and I think the first one, the absence of governance has been more a problem in the past, where you had a number of initiatives, varied initiatives, fragmented initiatives. Technology is still a bit fragmented, but the, the governance was extremely fragmented up until recently. Managing and fostering rapid innovation, we've dealt with that, we've mentioned about that. You doing that on an everyday basis. I've looked into what Sigfox has been doing for the past 5 years, essentially. I think you have solved some of those issues, and you might want to share a bit about us, with us about that. And that we've dealt with already. So let's park this one for time being. But if you want to comment on any of the other 3 topics.
Yeah. When it comes to governance, I think it's a bit of governance and standardizations to a certain extent come to. I mean, it touches each other. So, and there are 2 aspects of it. How I perceive it, there is one. There is a governance which has to come internally from a technology perspective. Is that there has to be governance that whatever technology that is being developed, that is being deployed, that is being sold out there in the market must be complying to the very basic standards of the ICT technology in Malaysia, when we talk about our standardization bodies like SIRIM and so on, there has to be these minimum compliances that has to happen. When you're talking about wireless technology, we have to work together with MCMC, and these are more of the surrounding governance related bodies that we should be working with. On standardization, it's a bit of it's quite challenging because standardization primarily happens when normally happens when smaller technologies which are a little bit isolated, but they are very practical technologies to use against. For example, if you take the telcos who come together and driving GSM, that's, it's a small guy trying to fight a bigger animal. So the standardization aspect will, I think, continue to be some level fragmented, but this is where I think academic institutions, the government bodies need to come together and actually support that whole process of supporting different kinds of ideas, technologies to actually boom, and not just leading, avoid any fostering of monopoly and so on. I think on rapid innovation, again, this is something that, once again, Dr. Suresh mentioned, this happens today very fast with the, now that we have internet, we have social media, we have access to a lot of information and a lot of people globally. So innovation is going to be more and more rapid. It's only going to get more and more faster. I think what is important is that what we've seen in Sigfox, that we have, again, the same example of fostering innovation by actually giving real world problems to startups. So the startup may have started some idea. So while they're exploring different ideas, we invite them to look at, because you guys are good you're doing a startup in agriculture, so why don't you help us solve a problem which we have in the real world and see what you can do with that. So it's getting that excitement into the startups that's going to naturally increase the speed of innovation.
Yes. And I think to bounce back on one of the questions this morning about the push innovation and pull innovation, right? So I think this is a very good example whereby Sigfox, when was that? 6, 7 years ago? Came 7 years ago, right? Came with this IoT technology, essentially a connectivity technology at the time, right? The issue was there was hardly any hardware out there. So basically, the company has first created a first set of hardware that could work and connect with their technology, with their connectivity networks. Then they've gone to the market. They've met prospects that over time became customers, for some of them at least. And that's when you add some pull, because the customers will be the ones to tell you, okay, this is what I want. I understand your capabilities. I understand what you can do for me. I trust you can do that for me, but can you develop it for me? So at the break, we're discussing push and pull. I think it's a good way to kind of picture it, but it's a combination of push and pull all the time. And I think most of the companies who are successful in the push will also have to kind of orchestrate the pull at a point in time. And that's exactly what Sigfox, which is the mother company of Experenti, has been doing. So with that, let me frighten you a bit or wake you up. These are the threats of IoT security. Don't expect that I comment this slide. But I think this is just an illustration of why for sometimes IoT was not pervasive, right? There were a number of threats and challenging out there that had to be solved. One was the gaps in the technical sophistication. Another one was the standards. We've just mentioned about that. They were not mature or not widely spread or not identified as at some governance level. So you had to kind of orchestrate that as well. I like the concept of the essential commodity, which seems kind of contradictory in essence. But what it means is that customers consider security essential. We all do. But who is willing to pay for it? And shouldn't that be a commodity, right? So I think this is one of the key elements about IoT, this kind of notion of essential commodity. I want security, but what should I pay for it, right? I think this is very important. And also when it comes to security, and because nobody really wants to pay for it, some of the semiconductor companies that you've come to were struggling to make profit from that, and they say, okay, why should I do it? What is the business case for me? So again, I think coming back to the push and pull, there's different aspects that come into play in terms of what will drive push or attract innovation. You know, in this particular case, we've mentioned that earlier, security was one of the issues of IoT, but to solve that, you need the hardware, you need the semiconductor company to provide the chips. Now, who is willing to pay for the development of those chips? So I think this is just a good illustration of what's happening out there in terms of what needs to be done and why things don't happen overnight. So once you have your innovations, they can be promoted, they can be seen as illustrated by Professor Suresh overnight. But there's a number of things that needs to be done ahead. So you can see this slide, there's a lot of red there. The idea was to also say that the threats are different and that at different levels, whether at the device level, at the network level, at the platform level, and will materialize differently according to various industries. So that's why when we say Internet of Things, it's very important that we say Internet of Things applied to what industry. So today we'll really focus on the smart manufacturing or industrial IoT, or in here in Industry 4.0, I mentioned that before, but I thought I would say it again. Another complicated slide that I will go very quickly through about the security issues. I think we've mentioned about them quite enough right now. Cybersecurity. So Professor Suresh is Mr. Cybersecurity in the academic world in Malaysia. Sorry, Suresh, you have to live to your reputation. But yes, I think that's been one of the issues as well. And I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Ashok, but this is part of what your customer says, no, I'm not ready because you have to prove me that. So how did you prove that to them?
Uh, um, I think, yeah, similar to what I was mentioning earlier. I mean, in the world today, where everything's moving to the cloud. I mean, the question of security is it's not even a question anymore. In fact, it's now it's a fundamental building block when anyone wants to go into the cloud, whether you are trying to deploy a service on the cloud or you want to become a cloud player. Like a site where you have, because there's a lot of companies that are doing that. They have all these data centers hosted in their offices, in their building, and they want to monetize their data center, their processing capability. So they start venturing into providing some level of a cloud kind of services, whether it's locally in Malaysia or even anywhere globally. So the fundamental question of security is, in fact, the first question that's always a focus on. So anything that's essentially anything that's connected, the first question is the primary focus would be on security. So it's becoming a less and less question that customers are asking. It's something that they always keep towards the end. So I think eventually security will not be will be like lunch. Nobody will ask about it, so you just have lunch and move on with life.
Yeah, so, and the consultancy way of saying that is the way I put it. So the way to think strategically about cybersecurity is that you need to understand what IoT security will mean for you, first and foremost, and for your business model, set up the roles and responsibility for that, and engage in the strategic conversation with the regulator and collaborate with the industry players. Because again, I think there is this thinking that you can, by protecting yourself, you are safe. But the threats come from outside, so you never know what happens and where they come from. So I think that's why we like to say that there are different ways to set your organization up for success in IoT security. Now, where are we, right? What's the maturity of IoT? What have been the phases of maturation, and where are we right now? Like any similar industry, and including obviously the internet itself that we touched base on a bit earlier, the IoT industry has been evolving in phases, and I'm sure you have many different ways you like to potentially illustrate that. But the first phase, and I took the example of internet because I think we are all familiar with it, and it's a bit more down the line already. So the first phase is to get the suppliers of infrastructure and hardware there. So in the age of internet was the Cisco, the Tricom. We were needing that to have the basic building blocks in place. The second phase is the services. What do you build on top of the infrastructure to grow to a global scale? So that's when the Google or the Yahoo and then the Google probably and some pushing the effort longer than others come into play. And then you have the third phase, which are all the adjacent business model when they appear. So the Amazon, the Airbnb appeared 20 years ago, but there would be no such things as Amazon 20 years ago or Airbnb 10 years ago. if you didn't have the right building blocks in place and if you didn't have some of the services that are built on. So those are the three essential phases that we can see. Illustrated differently. So phase one, you have all the connectivity, the sensors, the physical setup infrastructure, devices, hardware. Come IoT, check the box. This is passed, right? Phase two, software, analytics, platforms, security, done. So we are end of phase two. We're entering into phase three, getting to develop the real business case, the business models, and kind of make them relevant for different parts of the industry, right? So that's why I've tried to say here that we are towards the end of phase two, probably into phase three already, in your case.
Yep.
It's not the case of everyone, but then.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely. I mean, this view, and we are definitely already getting into the early stages of phase three. So today, all the building blocks are already in place. All the different services are already in place. I can go to Amazon and start my own business. I don't need to put data centers. I don't need to set up a network. I don't need. I probably need, if I have an office, I just have some Wi-Fi connectivity to have multiple PCs connected and just to get my internet connection. Other than that, I don't necessarily need anything else if I wanted to start a business. So essentially, when it's similar in the case of IoT. If you're looking at it from a connectivity internet perspective, so it's there. So now it's more of what are the use cases that's going to come into these business models. So maybe, for example, if you talk about smart manufacturing or you talk about smart health, you look at the complete solution, monitoring solutions for patients. So it's all about going out there and having access to this technology and buying a wearable device that goes onto a patient, and then up and easy, you're already generating, you already have access to medical services and doctors, and they have access to your health information, which they can already start looking after you and monitoring your well-being. So those are examples of use cases where it proves that we are already in the third phase.
Yeah, exactly. And now we said we are at the end of phase two, end of, yes, services are there. So why will you want to adopt IoT service, right? I think, again, this is the consultancy way of saying it, and I will want you to probably comment on top. But essentially, you want to do IoT and not some other connectivity technologies for a number of reasons. One is the cost. Second is the amount of power that devices are consuming. Third is the efficiency. And so we've tried to kind of, again, consultants, right? We've tried to say that, okay, what do we want to achieve in terms of targets? So improve efficiency, help business transformation. I think most of the time now we are there, and I'm sure you will want to comment on that. What you will want to do there after that is to, because customers say, okay, it's good that our devices are connected, but okay, what for, right? So what's the use to me? First, so then I need to be able to visualize that. But probably more importantly and increasingly important is, okay, take decision. And can the system help me take decision, or the system take decision for me? Is, I think, where we are in terms of the business case and use cases, right?
I think this is a very, very important slide for you students. I mean, this is where, and if I want to put it in a very very interesting way, that this is where, these are your ideas. These are where your ideas are going to come from. And if you hit one of these ideas and you are able to commercialize it, you become an entrepreneur. I mean, you're going to be the next Jeff Bezos, for instance, if I put it in that perspective. But essentially, these are we are already giving you some level of answers to the problems that the industry has. So the question of decreasing costs now, it's your task to go out to the industry to find out in what areas they want to decrease costs and why they want to decrease those costs. So it's all about the problem solving approach. It's about asking the right questions to solve the problem. So they want to decrease the amount of diesel they're consuming, because for a logistics transportation company, 45% of their spend goes into diesel. 45%. So if I'm making $1 million, 450,000 ringgit every year goes to diesel. So how can I, two things. One, it's obviously I'm trying to make better margins out of it. So I want to try to optimize my diesel use. I want to be one of those companies that's saving the environment. I want to use less hydrocarbons. So how do I solve that problem? So this is where students will have the opportunity to go and explore and work with the clients to actually find out where these problems are, go through the whole journey of identifying the problem, come back, do your research, do your analysis, do your studies, collect the data, come up with some ideas of how you can solve that problem. So again, it's applying that same thought in the other areas of increasing power, of increasing efficiency. How do I maximize the infrastructure that I have so I can produce more? Improving efficiency. So it all comes back. I mean, these are the things that you guys have the opportunity to do, and these are the areas that companies like ourselves, Experanti, a Malaysian company, will want to work with universities and give you actual problems and help us solve it. You take it as research, you make it, commercialize it. It becomes a solution that can apply to the industry, or one industry or multiple industries. Right. Experanti is not going to be in that. For example, maybe not other companies, but Experanti, for example, we know MUST has found a solution to increase the level of efficiency in the production line for XYZ manufacturing of products. And that research actually that finding becomes a solution that can apply for any production or manufacturing industry. So, just one more thing I would like to add. I think one of the biggest challenges in IR 4.0 is, where do I start? The question is, it's all nice, 9 pillars: edge computing, IoT, cloud infrastructure, all very nice. I run a manufacturing company. My revenue every year is about $10 million or 10 million ringgit, sorry, 10 million ringgit. I need to adopt IR 4.0. So what is IR 4.0 to an industrial owner like myself? Where do I start? I mean, even if I pick up a pencil and start thinking of where to start, I think this is one of the biggest challenges the industries are facing, is that, which I think there is a lot of support from the government, and I think this is where universities can play a very significant role, is to help SMEs. I think what Malaysia needs, for instance, is SMEs need help. And I think the universities can do a fantastic job, because you guys have the research experience and you have the research data from across industries or from across faculties that can actually be contributed into the whole adoption. So how we look at it when it comes to kickstarting your industry 4.0, forget about the technology, forget about the framework, forget about the business processes. Start with your fundamental problems. So business transformation is a journey. It's not an overnight journey. It's not something you pull out of a book and pay an IT company like IBM to come and implement 101 things and pay $50 million US dollars. No, it's not. It's a journey. So it's a journey that you're going to start with very small steps by solving your essential problems, and then you can improve, but you still haven't solved your fundamental problems. There is no way you will actually succeed. So that's how, I mean, Experanti, in the space of IoT, that's how we take our customers through that journey.
Yes, and just if you want to go and see Ashok and with your ideas, so this is the 4 pieces of advice I like to share you. So focus on the outcomes. What does it do for him? Interoperability, I think he'll take care, he'll help you with. Put the IoT data at work. So that's the best way to take advantage of IoT. And this one, start small and then scale up. Because, and that's why a number of, I wouldn't call that failures, I would like to call that lessons probably. So all those who came with big ideas about what IoT should be, where it should start, and where it should go. And actually, I was there, right, a few years ago, trying to promote IoT for one of these big companies. I don't think that's the right way to do it. I've tried to advocate that too, but that's a different story. What I think is very important is those 2. Start small, make it relevant. Make it relevant, make it economically relevant, make it technically relevant. Show that, and then scale up, right? And this that's one of the key lessons of IoT for the past 8-10 years, right? Everybody's looking at IoT from his own perspective. Why would telco have not succeeded in IoT before? They are much bigger than you. They have much more financial means. They have not been successful, right? Because they try to impose the model. They try to say, that's the way we'll do it. But it's not the way it works in IoT. You need, we've said that before, you need the hardware guys, you need the software guys, you need the platform guys, you need the guys who will do like the connective tissue between all of that. So it's a team approach to create this business model. Without the team approach, you cannot be smarter than the guy who has been running his factory for 20 years. I'm sorry, you cannot. And actually, that reminds me of one SME owner, manufacturing goods, says, all that is good, but how do I do it? Right? Exactly what you were saying. And he said, on my side, I've machines who are 20 years old. Some of them are 3 years old. So they don't even provide the same kind of data, right? So how do I kind of harmonize that? How do I get the same data from all my machines so that I can start to master, control, and drive my business using IoT? So those are some of the very concrete cases that I'm sure you have on a daily basis, right?
I mean, Patrick, in the context of digital transformations of companies and organizations, he's a better person to speak about this because he's been doing it for years. Again, when you're dealing with real life situations, when you're dealing with customers, the few things that scares customers when it comes to transformation, it's getting out of their comfort zone. I've been doing business this way. They use it as an excuse not to change. But in reality is that the world has transformed, has moved forward so much, they have to embrace this change. So first, they need to decide that they need to adopt, they need to change. So they need to transform. So IR 4.0 is about transformation. Digital transformation is about adopting technology that's going to help you go through that whole, that's going to help you transform and become a digital company where you become more efficient, you become more successful, more profitable, and so on. Once you have that first step, once you've passed the decision of adopting change, now it's about how do you execute it. I totally agree with Patrick, where I'm sure he's seen this more than I have. If there is no team involvement, if the whole company is not involved, and if the leadership from up there is not supporting the whole initiative, you can change all you want, but there will always be they will always be they will become a stumbling block. So you can only change to that far. So the support for change has to be top down, and the support for change has to be involving complete organization. So it's it's a bit of a it's a bit of a it's not just technological change. It's because it's also going to involve a cultural change as well. It's also going to involve a change in mindset. When you adopt technology and you start changing the way you work, you have to start changing the way you think. You have to start transforming the way you solve your problems, transforming the way you interact with your customers. So it has to be a global approach to this.
Yeah, and I think the key point here is that you need to create your relevance. You know, I mentioned I was working for Cisco, and Cisco in IT was king of the world, more or less. You know, I spearheaded the first IoT efforts across the region. And as we said, IT IoT is IT and OT. So creating the relevance on the OT side, the operational guys. It doesn't happen overnight, right? So the power utilities, the manufacturing plants, they have been running and running pretty well for decades. So before you can create and advocate and get your relevance accepted, it takes time. And I think being impatient in that doesn't help. It will not work. So I think this ability to really take the time to create your relevance is probably one of the key lessons there. If we want to really do it a complicated way and consultant way, you create some tables like that, but I will spare that to you because we can speak for at least 2 hours on this. So I'm sure you prefer to go and have lunch instead. So next, more important, because I think this is where you are and what you want to hear of is what's ahead of us. What kind of role can you play in IoT or IIoT or Industry 4.0? Because some of you will graduate from there. So we can see a number of domains and applications: logistics, retailing, power control, daily life issues, production. We'll come back to that. Traffic issues, you name them. You can add double of that. So this is the way we do it. That's my own advertising, sorry. What we try to do is to create the relevance we were discussing a bit earlier per industry segment. For insurance, for education, for industrial, travel and transportation, we'll have a proof of concept running in Malaysia in a few weeks. Financial services, consumer products, aerospace, government. So everybody have their own approach, their own needs, their own understanding of what these IoT should do for them. So don't come with the silver bullet approach. That's a recipe for failure, right? So really the idea, what we try to do ourselves is to really be this business development platform again. So what is of relevance to achieve what? And that's about it. So if you want to address those needs from the service side, using some devices and components and hardwares, this is where you need to be. I just finished my advertising here. There's one more. So what we do, and we try to apply that in a number of sectors. So you've heard about smart cities, you have heard about smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0 here, or Industry 4, WD forward, right? If I'm not wrong. Smart buildings, smart hospitals, smart retail. Essentially what you need is always the same, is infrastructure, the ability to create productivity, and build relevance on top. That will be different for different people. So this is what it looks like at the beginning. Industry 4.0, this is it. Right? How do you like it? So, yeah, so how do you make sense of that is the key question, right? By the way, it's from World Economic Forum. Huh? I didn't take the time to do that myself. But I think I like it because it's extremely relevant. You have all the key issues there, right? So if you want to do Industry 4.0, you have to consider the value chain, how the data are flowing, right? Smart data, what does it mean? How do I make the data smart? And what is smart data? And smart data for manufacturing is different than for retail. I can tell you that. Or for power utilities, again, different. So, how to make that happen, right? And how do you master all those variables? How to make sense of the noise? So that's the way. We are more comfortable with this one, right? Feels more under control. But this is exactly the same thing, because if you look at it, the source is the same. Again, World Economic Forum. And industrial internet. They call it industrial internet. It's not industry 4.0, and it's another terminology once again. But the whole idea is the same. You have the key enablers that we've discussed. You have some of the key inhibitors that we've gone through, like security and so on. There are a number of issues and impact on business that we are targeting. So how do we make sense of all that? That's one way of doing it. That's one way of creating some order out of the mess that was there on the previous slide. Now,
Maybe I could just add one thing to that slide. No, don't worry. So, when I was mentioning about the top-down approach, when it comes to transformation, that's exactly it. I mean, that's the strategy. That's the approach. Let me put it in the most practical way, simplest way possible. MD of the company, I want to make my company more efficient. I want to improve my efficiency level of my production line from 5 to 10%. That's the goal of the top management. What does that mean to the guy on the ground who's running the manufacturing line every day? How do you execute that, and what does he need to do to be part of that transformation process, and the role that he needs to play, and the technology that he needs to adopt, and the processes, the new processes that he needs to learn to contribute to that improvement from 5 to 10%. Maybe just his role will probably contribute only 0.5%. So what else that needs to happen to make that change from 5 to 10%? So now you go to the other parts of the organization. Actually, there was one very important word on the spaghetti slide earlier.
I don't know how to get back.
But anyway, okay. If in the previous one, yeah, execution. So again, this is where experience, like from Patrick, who has seen this, ideas, strategies put together. I know who to address, how to address. The transformation is a journey, so the execution aspect of it becomes so critical. And you have to make sure that during this whole transformational process that you are observing the change, you're measuring the change, and you're actually achieving the goals that you've defined when you started this journey of change. So if you're not achieving that 10%, but I only achieve 8, you can ask the question of why, or you can ask the question of, okay, we have hit 8, let's work out another plan to go from 8 to 10. Which could be the second phase of the transformation. But at least you start with smaller steps to contribute to that.
Thank you. And by the way, I think since we came back on that slide, I think another one which is very important is there, which is essentially what your company is trying to do, right? And so this slide is about once you're trying to make sense about the mess, into something which is a bit more understandable and academically shareable, you tried to put some names behind. So how to, when you focus on connectivity, and we'll come back to that because different companies come from different angles, right? So you have the device companies who have been there in the field of industrial IoT for many years. The big boys, some of the smaller boys, more specialized. You have the connectivity guys, the usual suspects who have been there for quite some times, and the new players. Actually, this is your sister company in both Singapore and Taiwan, right? So should have your name there. But the whole idea is that you have a number of new players out there. There's a number of platforms. You have the usual suspects guys who have understood that there's an opportunity, but you have more specialized guys like those who have developed their platform just for IoT. And you have the analytics side. And the whole idea is to make sense out of all that at the same time, because nothing works in isolation. Nothing that, so no company that tried to drive either from here or from there on its own will succeed. Very simple. And just to take the example of what you're doing, you come from here, right? But you had to go there, create your own ecosystem of partners that will answer and be able to provide solutions to your customers, kind of adding to it. So I think that that's very important, and the key challenge here is to really make sense out of all that. And there are some slides that are even more complicated, but with many more names, which obviously makes them absolutely unreadable, and that was not the idea. So the idea here is to say, okay, if you really try to focus on like 4 components of what IoT solution players, and you had to categorize them, this is a simple way of doing it. But if you don't do those 4 together, you have no use case, you have no business case. Simple. Now, IIoT, connected manufacturing, smart manufacturing, industry 4.0, again, same thing. Right? How to do that? Why don't I let you comment on this one? Okay, you want me to do it?
This is the big picture. This is the goal. This is where every company wants to be. So I think what is most important is that what I noticed in this diagram is just focus on the arrows, those little arrows, that it's the information that's flowing back and forth between different parts of the operations, different parts of the process, different parts of the organization, where data is being used, utilized, translated, brought back in order to make certain or specific decisions throughout the whole journey. So I take the example of smart ports. I think the port in Holland, I think today it's one of the most advanced ports in the world, because it's all the gantry cranes are remote controlled. I mean, what their goal is eventually that these cranes would be self-driving cranes. So in order to achieve that level, they have taken actually very structured steps to achieve that. So today where they are is, in fact, they're already at this phase of the ecosystem, or the sort of the environment and infrastructure that they've put in to monitor the level of accuracy, the integrity of the data, how the data is processed and timely available, and how that actually translates into certain triggers and activities. Then it's a matter of automating all of that. So until that happens, until you are 100%, or at least, okay, there's no 100%. If you're 95% above or 99% confident of the level of maturity in terms of the information that that you're harnessing from your organization, that's when you can actually go into the phase of fully automating and exploring self-driving port cranes, gantry cranes.
And before we jump into the last slide, so we finish soon. Bear with us. This slide is also to kind of share with you what we do at different steps, because you know you are hearing about IoT, big data, analytics, machine learning, modern apps, cloud media. All of you are specialized, even 200 times more than I am, probably. But you do that. You go to the plant owner. He says, "Okay, sorry, but I don't have time." So the question is, okay, what can you do for me? So if you don't answer with things like that, what are the benefits for him? His attention span is 10 seconds, right? So you have to say, I'll help you reduce unplanned downtime. I can make some savings. Reduce maintenance cost. Improve equipment longevity. And that's all what is predictive maintenance and all these kind of things that go behind that. Improve employee skills. Yes, obviously. You have manpower. How do you make their job even more interesting and important? That's also part of it. So what we are trying to do here, and the last slide will be to show you how concretely Experiency does it. But this is to tell you, you have to embrace all that stuff. And I'm sure each and every one of you has some element of interest on that slide. So how do you connect it to the rest of your partners, team members, fellow students? Teamwork, remember? I think this is here. This is on this slide. This is you to decide how to make it happen. But to kind of tie everything together, that's a way to create relevance. That's a way to create your own space. That's the way to exercise your creativity. That's the way to potentially create your IP, right? But to do that and for your IP to become relevant to people other than you and your family, friends, you have to think a little bit beyond, right? And this is what this slide is trying to illustrate. Now, to deploy it, this is how you do it.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite slides. We went to a customer, went to a same scenario, but it's a little bit. Sorry, it was a bit of the reverse. So excited, a very traditional company running the business for over 50 years. They want to embrace change. They want to go into IR 4.0. They like the buzzword. They like the fact that they not only want to transform. I think it's also important to be part of the economy that adopts new technology into their business. So it starts with a presentation, and it starts with the question of how long does it take for me to implement artificial intelligence or machine learning? No, it was something along the lines of, okay, I'll give you a PO. You implement machine learning applications onto my business. I'm like, okay, machine learning. The whole definition of machine learning is that it's learning. And learning is a process and involves a lot of information, involves a lot of data. So, to answer situations, to take, again, applying the same principle of solving a problem and having that journey to solve that problem and transform, it takes time. So, especially in the context of business intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning, AI, self-driving capabilities or self-automating capabilities, it all involves a lot of data that you need to first collect. And the first you start collecting, then the next question is, are you collecting from the right points? Are you collecting enough? Do I collect every second or do I collect every day? I mean, all this data needs to be collected. So that itself takes time. And the more time you take to collect, the more information you have, the more mature you become. At certain point, I mean, you don't want to be collecting data for the next 5 or maybe 2 years or 3 years, but you can already start utilizing that data to, because you can see certain trends, you can see certain indicators, you can see certain patterns that allows you to, that triggers you that you need to implement some changes. So this is where you can make some decision making and change the way you do certain things. Now, over time, that you have more data, I've implemented the process now. I think that, look, this is becoming a routine. I'm now able to, by going into the whole automation part of it, the whole idea of moving resources, reskilling them to do more interesting stuff, to be to be doing new areas in their business. Now they automate this part of. So that's where the more data you will have will take you into the phase of prediction. The more data I have, I will know at the end of the year I need to stock up more raw materials. I need to have 20% increase my trailer availability by 25% in December because I know January is going to be a peak. So I can predict the way I do business. So again, this whole part is a journey that you need to go through to harness information to take you through that for you to grow from a beginner to be more mature and eventually becoming predictive.
Okay, thank you. Because that's very practical, right? So I just realized we are over time already, so don't want to use up your patience much more, but I have a couple of other messages to finish. One is you are in a unique positions to make sense out of this whole value chain, right? Industry 4.0, Industry Forward, as it is in Malaysia, is happening. It's the way it's happening out there. So if you want to create the relevance to the guys out there, you have some elements, hopefully, after this discussion this morning. Second, if you think it's too much like, okay, the thing of yesterday, there are a couple of more ideas about what you can do further than that, right? Essentially, you can create your value with data. This is what Experiment is trying to do as well. Because as we all know, the more data you collect, the more insights you get, and the more sense you can make out of your operations. And this is how you will transform the whole value chain. There are a few challenges to capitalize on IoT data. I won't cover that today because I don't want to stay between you and lunch. And there are some smart ways to do it, including those from the big boys. And with that, I wish to thank you for your attention, and that's it. Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, sure. My disclaimer.
Thank you. My name is Francis. I think IoT is a trend, whether you like it or not, it's moving. I think as individual, as an industry, we ought to be embrace it. Okay. Now, my question is in terms of security. Since both of the speakers have mentioned a lot of security is one of the stumbling block perhaps for us to move in. Now, I'm wondering. Of course, I'm a management student. I'm wondering why I didn't hear a word of blockchain. To use a blockchain technology for the security. Thank you. If yes, then go ahead. If no, then okay.
So how much money are you ready to spend? Yeah, because I think that's potentially one of the issues, right? But yeah, Ashok, you want to take this one?
That's right. So okay, absolutely. So blockchain is one technology that can be applied. I mean, what we're trying to say here is that, in fact, if you actually look at the data framework or the sort of like architecture blueprint, while it doesn't specifically mention blockchain, but it's about how do you effectively manage and manage the data, and how you manage the security levels of the data. So from there, based on that sort of guideline, that sort of recommendations as part of the blueprint, it's a decision that needs to be made whether you want to use technologies like blockchain, or you want to use standalone technologies like within the data center and so on. But I absolutely agree with you that blockchain is one technology that should be considered. Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Since my expertise is about environmental management and waste minimization, and it was very interesting that IoT can be implemented in the area of waste reduction, I just want to know about the possible opportunities in Malaysia, because we are dealing with the problems of waste generation. And I know one part is about big data, and we should also have a good database in order to implement it successfully. But as far as I know, in Malaysia, we are facing to the deficiency of data, especially for waste generation and also all the information in terms of waste and waste management. So how we can solve or how we can implement it in Malaysia in order to achieve sustainable development as one of the target that in Malaysia.
You want to take a take at it, or I go?
Yeah, if you don't mind me trying to take this, because we are doing this on a daily basis, trying to solve environmental problems in collaboration with municipals and government. So how we want to solve it, I think the first challenge that we are trying to solve is to identify where the problems are. So the biggest challenge in waste management today in Malaysia is that it's more of a bit of a policy, but I mean I will surpass that. So for example, waste collection in Malaysia is not managed by the municipal. It's subcontracted. So there is a private company that's doing the waste management. So that's fine. That's the business model. But the challenge is that today there are no. It's again, they are at the early stages of their journey. How do I first find out how effective or non-effective am I managing waste? So one of the things that we try to help them with is that let's try to tap into, let's try to get data from certain areas in the waste management area. So for example, let's monitor the efficiency of the vehicles that are going around collecting. From there we can see whether it's frequent enough or not frequent enough. We've even gone down to the point of monitoring levels inside industrial waste bins. So waste bins fill up, are they clearing it in 2 days, or are they clearing it in 2 weeks? So there are a lot of opportunities in, especially with the municipals and with the government, with the federal government, where they're trying to find ways to improve the level of efficiency. But the challenge is actually to understand how efficient they are right now. So once you've sort of like identified that, I think you're already halfway there to finding solutions to solve it.
Yeah. And I think just to complement it in a different ways is depends on the definition of what waste management is, right? Because the different sorts of waste, for example, perishable versus non-perishable. You know, perishable in this kind of climate, yeah, you can try to optimize the traffic of the trucks, and all the technology can do that. But is it what you want to do at the end? Maybe, maybe not. You know, for example, Singapore's decided that. So they've made some experiments, but they've just decided no, because after 2 days it's smelling. So even though the bin is not fully full, so we don't want to wait 2 more days, because then we have problems with one, the population, potentially the rodents coming, and all these kind of things. So I think the ability to really define exactly what we want to do and put some words in terms of where this IoT will first make sense, how it can make sense is an important one as well, right?
So the example I gave about the private companies that do collection, the issue wasn't more of the, 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 the amount of waste, but it was more on the scheduling, whether they are, it's more for enforcement.
Thank you very much, Professor Patrick. It was a very informative session for the American College of Higher Education, the International Center of the Malaysia University of Science and Technology. For our doctoral researchers are here. Thank you very much. And this is my question. In the midst of knowledge economy, the competitive edge lies in the IT, no arguments. So ubiquitous computing and ambient intelligence, right, makes people think differently and make things easier. In the internet, considering the supply chain, so it's a network of network. So my question is about security. So I don't want people to invade my privacy, taking my data. I am referring to the second point of the definition of IoT, collecting data from physical devices. Without my consent, I don't like it. So the thing is, my point is, this is where the ethics come to play. So we should be self-disciplined, otherwise mankind will disappear from the earth.
No, I think I agree with you. I think the
Why didn't you mention about the computer ethics and how can we embed ethics into this particular consideration? That's my question.
okay. No, I think that's a valid point, and that's a different way of or different words to put on what we at a higher level call governance, right? So ethics is one element of the governance, in my personal opinion. Because today everybody's focusing on data privacy and who does what with whom, right? And who does what with my own data. I will not do a test here in this room, but among those who have a Facebook account, now that we know what happens, right? Everyone in this room knows what your data can be used for, right? Who has unsubscribed to Facebook? You have? So nobody has. So I think it is an extremely valid point. Governance, ethics, what you want to be in control of, how do you put the end user or the patient, we had a very good discussion with Professor Suresh this morning about the data, your medical data. Would you trust to own your medical data other than you? So, you want to say something? No? Okay. Okay, do we have any other pressing question? I'll stare a little bit around for those who have questions. I think you also can, but again, we don't want to stay in between you and lunch because we know you have a limited time. Yes. Okay, I come to you.
Yeah, just add on to this governance part. With regard to privacy of data, there are many laws and regulations. The Data Privacy Act. So many countries' data privacy is, when it comes to data privacy, there are a whole heap of laws and regulations. So there are countries where you don't have data privacy. Especially with EU, they are so concerned about the data privacy and the cyber governance and ethics. They have, GDPR regulations. So I don't think there's a problem with the privacy of the data. So there are a whole heap of laws. Still in Sri Lanka, it's in the fertilization stage. But when it comes to other countries, there are laws.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Actually, EU comes from, so there's been a number of countries that have been thinking about data privacy and how to protect the end user, I think. And we have had this discussion in a number of countries in terms of, okay, how do you balance data privacy with making champions of data analytics, because you need the data to be able to develop the software and so on and so forth. And look at it from what's happening here in Asia. So finally, Europe has said, okay, GDPR is for everyone, every country, 28, done. You have a couple of countries that says, okay, those guys have been thinking of it, why don't we just adopt it? So Thailand says, okay, we do that. Now you have a number of other countries. You know, you have the PDP Act here, you have one in the Philippines, you have one in Singapore. Essentially, you're trying to achieve the same thing. We could think that ASEAN could have a common framework, for example. And I know there are some initiatives to go towards that, but you know, unless you are, like we were saying, governance and a framework and shared ways of looking at things, you still some loopholes that a number of guys out there like to play with. That's unfortunately the case. Yes.
So only thing to cap the loopholes of the law is the Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative last and do unto others as they do unto you. So if you are ethically behaving, others would do you to you.
I'll give you another very practical example of when it comes to security. You know, everybody questions, everybody wants to know. I want to know. You know, it's some of the questions that, basic questions that we ask when we deal with partners who are providing platforms or partners who are running services off the cloud. It's a question that we need to ask. But I also ask my customers. You know, and when we worked with some experts and we gathered some information in terms of security breaches, most of the time, I would say, I mean, this is based on my research, but of course, you guys can do a better job at doing the research. 1 out of 10 would be a potential hack. 9 out of 10 is because I can buy, I have my application running on AWS. I have an option whether I want it secured or unsecured. Secured, unsecured is $10 a month. Secured is $100 a month. It's a big difference in cost. So it's okay. I'm just selling. I'm just running some visualization apps and collecting some data. So there's a reason why AWS charges you 100 US for that a month, because, and there is a reason why there is the option given to a user to either take or not. So it's up to the customers or up to the developers or the platform owners to decide what is suitable for their needs. So if you have confidential critical data, or not to say confidential data, if you're running critical to a certain level of industrial grade level kind of information that you're managing, and you go and choose $10 subscription, and then you say we breached, but AWS will turn around that I got 10,000 security developers and engineers there, and there is a reason why we have this option for you. Is because when you're operating in this kind of environment, we recommend or we strongly suggest that you adopt these services. So there is a, I mean, I like this discussion about security, but sometimes we forget that the problem with security is us.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick and Mr. Ashoka Nair. Next, we would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Kashaya Riazdani to deliver token of appreciation to Mr. Patrick and Mr. Ashoka Nair. Please welcome. Thank you, Professor Dr. Kashaya Razdani and Mr. Patrick and Mr. Ashokan Nair. With that, the morning session of second day of the colloquium has ended. The next session will be resuming at 2 p.m. Please do not be late. Thank you.